Hey guys, it's Nadia from LiaDia Designs and I'm back with another tutorial. Today we're going to be creating a two-tier tray and we're going to be using these molds here. So these molds are already shaped into like a bowl or a rounded plate shape, and we have a top tier and a bottom tier. The top tier that I'm going to be using is actually meant to be a tier tray, so you can see that it already has a little nub there for the hole. The but and it also goes all the way through the molds. Normally I cut these off, but since I can't do that, I'll use it as is. And then this one here doesn't have the little nub, so I'll have to drill the hole myself, which is perfectly fine. So what we'll be using is we're going to be pouring resin into these and adding designs. And to add the designs, we're going to be using pigment paste. So I'm going to be using pigment paste from Just Resin. I have that green, and I have a couple pink ones as well. As you can see, a darker one and a lighter one. So the two colors are pink sherbet and rose pink. And then the green, it doesn't actually have a name. It looks like it's been rubbed off or something. So, but as you can tell, it's just a normal kind of bright green. So we're going to be using those colors. I'm also going to be using a little bit of white, mostly just to kind of make lighter versions of the green that I'm using. And this is my angel white from LeRez Expressions. So I love using that white. It's perfect for a lot of things. And I'm going to be using my favorite champagne glitter from DB Resin Products, as well as some new glitters that I recently got in from Laura's Art Corner. These are her stiletto series, and we have blush and mint that we're going to be using. So I'm excited to get started on this project, so let's go. Alright, so we're going to start with our bottom tier, and I've already mixed up my resin, and once again I'm using Counterculture's Thin Viscosity Artist Resin, and I've mixed that up with a little bit of my champagne glitter. So now we're just going to pour that down inside the mold so that our edges of our tray are going to be sparkly and super glittery, of course. So, and then I'm just going to move it around to make sure that it's spread out evenly inside the mold. And then once we're done that, we're going to take clear resin and we're going to try to fill the mold as much as possible. So I've actually already, as you can see in those small cups, I've already put aside a little bit of resin for our pigments that we're going to be adding to this for the design. But and that's about a third of those small cups each is what I've put aside there. So we're just going to empty this out. And once we're done filling the mold, then we'll just use our heat gun to get rid of the bubbles. And then once we're done that, we're actually going to need to let this sit. Now for my resin, I need to wait about 12 to 15 minutes before I can start adding the design. For your resin, it might be different. I do have a tutorial about timing your resin. I'll link that above. But for me, I'm going to be waiting about 15 minutes. So around the 15-minute mark, I'm going to go ahead and start adding the designs to this mold. And as you can see, I've actually already added the green pigment to the one cup and then a mixture of green and white to the second cup. And I'm just going to go in and just using my popsicle stick, and I'm just going to randomly just kind of layer the resin, the pigmented resin on top here. So I'm doing kind of circles, but it really doesn't matter because we're going to be swirling this whole thing anyway. So once I have that, I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm just going to create random swirls because I'm just trying to create an abstract look here. And really all I want is for those two colors to kind of create some interesting flows together. And yeah, so we're just going to swirl them, but not too much. We don't want to blend them too much. We do want to see some of those lines in between there. So we're just going to just not go too far, hopefully. So we don't want to blend it too much. And after looking at this, I decided that I actually wanted the green to kind of go down a little bit inside the mold as well, because otherwise it's going to create a harsh line where the pigment just kind of touches the edge there. So I'm going to be taking the brush and pushing the pigment down a little bit, just so again it doesn't have that harsh line, and it's going to give it a more organic look. So I'll do that. Alternately, we could have just kept the pigment away from the edges, so that was an option too. And for the top tier, we're going to be doing something similar in terms of starting out with pouring our resin with champagne glitter around the edges. This was a new batch of resin that I created. Because of the working time of my resin, I didn't want to run into the possibility of a flash cure. So, and a flash cure, for anyone who doesn't know, it just means that your resin will basically cure before you're able to pour it. And a lot of times it happens because you've left it in a cup or something like that, and it just heats up super fast and it just cures into like a rock solid, um, a rock solid piece before you've had a chance to even pour it. So I didn't want that to happen. So in that case, generally what I do is I just wait, and then I'll just pour a second cup of resin. And this way I know that I'm working with a fresh batch and I'm not trying to race against the clock for something like that. So here we are with our second pour, and we're again, same process. We're just going to go ahead and fill in the mold, and we've put aside a little bit of resin for the colors as well. So once we finish filling in our mold, once again, we're going to use our heat gun to get the bubbles out, and then we will let it sit for, again, about 12 to 15 minutes before we start adding in our design. And while we wait, I'm going to just start mixing up the colors. A lot of people wanted to see these pigment pastes because maybe they're not familiar with it. So these pigment pastes already come in a liquid form, and then you just add that to your resin, and it just creates a really smooth finish. So it's great for flower effects, just because for whatever reason, I think it's because with mica powder tends to feather and dissipate a little bit more. So for whatever reason, the pigment paste just works better, probably because it's already in liquid form and it doesn't have to dissolve again. So I've done both of my colors here, so you can see the two pinks. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just double check my resin to see how it's doing. We want it to kind of start getting a little bit thicker. And once again, if you check that tutorial that I have on timing your resin, I kind of explain the consistency that you're looking for there. So while we're waiting, I just wanted to make sure I add in this rose gold foil in the center, because I do want our flower to have a little bit of a center. So just put that in there and just mix it in, because we don't want to have any like large chunks of the rose gold foil. So just go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to quickly torch it again. Make sure when you torch it, you're keeping it far away from any of the actual silicone mold part. You just want it only be touching the resin. Otherwise, you're going to cause problems for your mold. And as you can see, I'm going to be putting the resin that I've mixed into these little piping bags. For this flower technique, we're going to be using the piping bags. And I just put them in a cup, so this way it's easy to pour into them. And then once we're done that, we can tie them up and cut the hole at the bottom. And we want to make sure that when we do that, we're just making a really small hole. We don't want it to make too big of a hole, otherwise the resin's just going to pour out and we're not going to have a lot of control over it. So we're just going to put those in there. And if the bag is large enough, then I usually just tie it, but this one was a little bit short, so it couldn't really work for tying. So I'm just going to use some Scotch tape to just tie off the ends. And we'll do the same thing with the other bag. And once we're done this, I'll need to check the resin once again, and it's getting pretty close. Okay, so we're all set to get started now, and I'm just gonna do a really simple technique where I'm just gonna draw a spiral with my dark pink. So we'll just go all the way to the center. There we go. And then I'll do the same thing with the lighter pink, trying to go in between, but it's not really necessary to be super accurate about that. So we'll just do that quickly. And I decided I wanted to add more of the dark pink, so just go ahead and add more of that through, trying to cover up some of those spaces. So we'll do that. Okay. And then again, I'll take my paintbrush and now I'm going to go in and add some lines to kind of create the flower petals. So this one is okay. This one I'm going to be making it a little bit more symmetrical. We don't always do that with flowers. Sometimes we want them to be more organic looking. But for this one, I wanted to kind of have a more symmetrical looking flower just because it is a round dish. So we just wanted to have something a little bit more even looking around there. And then I'm just going to flare out some of the petals outwards. I was kind of going for a lotus type flower, but this also would work for, since Christmas is coming, it would actually work really well for a poinsettia flower as well. So that's an option too. So again, there's no right or wrong here. It really comes down to how much detail you want to add to your flower. You could just add a few petals, or if you want to go and add a lot more detail like I'm doing here, that's definitely an option too. But once we're done with this, then we will let it cure overnight, and then we'll be ready to unmold it in the morning. It's the next morning and we're ready to start taking our trays out of the mold. So we'll do that carefully here, and we can already see the glitter, which makes me so happy. So, and I like how the glitter just kind of it's kind of floating, like some of it sank down and some of it didn't. So it just kind of gives a nice look. It didn't just all sink to the bottom. So, and look how cool that green looks. And with that abstract swirl, it just looks really neat. I didn't want to make actual leaves. And so this kind of gives that leaf effect without being too constrained to it. So that's our bottom tier. And now we're ready for our top tier. And again, same thing here. I love the glitter. And I did add in those stiletto glitters from Laura's Art Corner. The top tier got a little bit of the pink, and the bottom tier got a little bit of the green. And you can kind of see it there in the reflection as we're looking at it. It just has a bit of hit of color around the edges there. And I really like how this flower turned out as well. And like I said, as I was going for a lotus, but then I think it works really well for the Christmas season as well as a poinsettia. So, and of course we have that hole from the mold, which does make it easier, but and we can kind of get an idea of how it's going to look when it's a two-tier. So I'll get it assembled and then we'll see how it looks. And here is the final assembled piece, and I really like how this turned out. I have some ideas of how I would make another version of this, so I'll probably do a video on that at another time, but I hope you guys liked how this turned out. I thought it was really neat to have you know, two different tiers, you know, like kind of looking like a floating flower. So I hope you guys liked how this turned out. If you did, let me know in the comments what you think, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks guys, take care, bye.